Good evening and welcome to Thursday Night Life with Chef Brackman. Anybody home? Okay, tonight the topic is remembering food from ancestral tables to modern day confusion. So basically, today we're going to be discussing how food got so complex. Why does nutrition advice seem complex, more complex than ever? Hello. That's what we're going to discuss today. We're going to try to decolonize food history to understand what we had, how we got to where we are. We're going to try to decolonize food history, take a trip down food memory lane, and compare what our ancestors did to modern food recommendations. So, as you know, I am a chef, a nutritional therapist, a world traveler. I have lived in 7 countries and visited 60. Hi, love. And visited 60. I have studied international food systems and diets. And people have bounced around several diets and are still struggling. So what's going on? So I'm going to just put a few questions out there so that we can be thinking about it through the course of this discussion. So are food guidelines more complicated than they were before? Has food changed in composition, or has our bodies changed? Is our lifestyle affecting the way we eat food? Is migration affecting our diets? Is moving between countries affecting our diets? Is healthy food expensive? We're going to look at impact of globalization on food and what our ancestors did. So in looking at what our ancestors did, that's where we're going to start from. But before we look at what our ancestors did, we're going to look at what exactly they had in terms of food. So 2 years ago, I was in Cote d'Ivoire on holiday, and I'd gone to this city called Grand Bassam. And as I was walking around with my tour guide, he was showing me this street that was lined with mango trees. They were 300 years old, about 300 years old. And they were planted by the colonial masters at the time, the French. And so he told me, the mangoes were brought in from India. And then we walked a bit more, and he showed me some coconuts that were brought in from Sri Lanka and said, yeah, coconuts are originally from the Indian subcontinent and mainly Sri Lanka. And then we also saw cacao and avocado from Mexico. So as the way that the Ivorians had catalogued where everything came from, and they're very relaxed about it, as opposed to sometimes Nigerians, when you tell them cassava is not indigenous, they will start screaming. So I really liked it a lot, and it got me thinking, which has affected my future trips, what I look for in terms of food. So it also got me to think about what my own ancestors did, the Igbos. So in Igbo land, we call coconut Aki Oyibo, because we had a nut called Aki. The palm kernel nut is indigenous to Igbo land, to Nigeria. And Aki has the same texture with coconut. So when the Portuguese introduced coconut to us, we said, oh, we have this texture, Aki. So we called it Aki Oyibo. Oyibo means foreign. So coconut became Aki Oyibo. So when they introduced avocado to us, we're like, wait a minute, we have something similar called ube. So we had African pear ube, which is purple, green inside. The fleshy bit inside is oily, like the avocado, and it has a big seed in the middle. So we immediately named avocado Uboibo. And it's not just for foreign things. For things, we also catalog them by where they came from. So when the Igbos encountered tiger nuts, it's not indigenous to our area. It was introduced to us by Hausa people from the north. So we called it Aki Hausa because it has the texture of the Aki. So this got me thinking, if we understand and start cataloging where and when certain things came to our diet, and we know that our ancestors lived longer way back, so maybe it's beneficial to start thinking about what they ate and ensuring that we keep them in our diet, as opposed to looking for foreign things that are healthy, instead of us to abandon the grains that are native to us and start looking for quinoa and every other thing that is a superfood in the world right now, which is expensive given the exchange rate and shipping and everything. So we need to start thinking. That's part of the reason we're having this conversation. So our ancestors, in a nutshell, their food was seasonal. Not like now that I live in Doha. Every day of the year, there is mango in Doha. My ancestors, when mango season was over, it was over. So if I decide not to eat any other fruit in the world but mango, it's possible in Doha, because if it doesn't come from Brazil, it will come from Egypt, it will come from Yemen, it will come from the US, but year round, there is mango in the shop. And what that does is that you lose variety in your diet. So their food was seasonal, it was locally grown, it was minimally processed and culturally grounded. So pre-1500s, before the transatlantic trade started, before the Portuguese started landing on our shores, what did they have in terms of food? Because that's why I said we should decolonize food history, because we are so focused on resisting that they brought things to us. We should ask, what did we have? And why were they so interested in us? That made me look into what did Europe have as food. Europe did not have potatoes. Potatoes came from Peru. They didn't have wheat in the beginning. Wheat was domesticated in the Fertile Crescent, which is modern day Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. What did they have? They had oats, they had rye, they had buckwheat, they had some cabbage and stuff. Their food was pretty not diverse. So I can imagine for survival, they went looking in the Americas and anywhere and transplanting food across the world. So in itself, the food transplant is not the danger. Is how we now process the food and how we now allowed our own native foods to fall off the map is the issue. I have a list, it's quite a long list of the foods that they had before this whole contact. It's a long one, but I'll just brush through some of them, because some of the fruits back then are disappearing. When I grew up in Enugu, there were a lot of fruits like meme, oto, cheleku, tamarind velvet, udara. Some of them, the younger people are not eating them anymore. So we had black eyed peas, we had akide, which is our local black beans, and it could be eaten in the pod. We had bambara groundnut, which is okpa. We had locust beans, which almost every tribe in Nigeria has a fermented version. Yorubas make iru out of it. Hausas make dawa dawa, and Igbos make ogiri okpeyi. We have the African breadfruit okwa. We have millet, sorghum, African rice, fonio, sesame. As we are still a big exporter of sesame, but most of these ancient grains are mainly in the north. So the north have a wider variety in their cuisine with some of these ancient grains, right? We had cocoyam, water yam, aerial yam. This is the yam that grows on the stem, not an underground yam. It's yellowish inside. We had aerial yam, we had fluted pumpkin, bitter leaf, African spinach, water leaf, jute leaves, which Yoruba people call ewedu. Igbos used to eat it. We called it ahihara. We didn't eat it like the soup that Yoruba people make with it. We ate it with yam porridge. It was a little slimy, but I liked it. So basically, when there was no abundance and when we ate within season, we ate what was available. But the problem is that when there's abundance or it's coming from somewhere else, you start having choices about what you prefer. So we had wild yam, we had okra, we had bush herbs, we had yam, obono, egusi, shea nuts, palm kernel, African walnut, tiger nut, garden egg, alligator pepper. Is a long list, but we had herbs, we had spices, we had a lot of things. Our pre-colonial food was diverse, plant forward, high in fiber, seasonal, a lot of fermented things, rooted in ecology, not trends. So we need to think about, what are they telling us to do now? What is the current food recommendation? They're asking us to eat fiber, less processed, diverse. This is what our ancestors were doing before confusing nutrition advice started coming to us. So that was pre-1500s. And then between the 1500s and the 1600s, we had the Portuguese and early Atlantic trade. So at this point in our history, we had cassava coming, cassava, maize, peanuts, chili peppers, and pineapple, and also tobacco and granules. Granite took off well in the north because their climate and their soil was much better suited for granules. We had the granite pyramids, we exported granite. It was a big deal, right? And their oil also started trickling down because my ancestor in the eastern part of Nigeria, we mainly use palm oil. And then the granite oil also came around, and that's what increased the era of frying things. And then 1600s to 1700s, this was the adaptation period. We fermented, we dried, we roasted. So cassava now started being gari and fufu. Peppers were soup bases. Maize started being pap, toasted corn, roasted corn. Granite was now kwili and soup and oil in this era. Then 1700s to the 1800s, this is the transatlantic flow return. So this is where the formerly enslaved Africans were returning to Nigeria and parts of West Africa. So cassava processing techniques expanded, tapioca style mills came in, expanded use of coconuts and more use of citrus fruits such as oranges and lime in that era. And then in the 1800s, colonial cash crops expansion. This is where they now started expanding the things they wanted to plant on our soil and export. And when I was in Sri Lanka, I explained this process to you. Like in Sri Lanka, the Portuguese went there first. They tried to plant coffee, but the diseases and everything didn't work out for them. The Dutch arrived, having come from Indonesia. They realized that there are a lot of spices here, like cinnamon and the Ceylon cinnamon. So they just camped their trade on the spices. It's the Brits that came and now attempted tea. It worked out. And then we had the world famous Ceylon tea. So when they arrived in Nigeria, they also started all the cash crops. Cacao was successful. We are still a big exporter of cacao and rubber. And they tried tea on a small scale, but it didn't really take off. Vegetables expanded, like tomatoes, onions, mainly in the north. The north was very successful with planting onions. And then the twins came, carrots and cabbage, our coleslaw, our main salad, our main Western salad style vegetables. And then the 1900 to 1950s, urbanization and imports. This is where the real change started, right? Because all these things that have been happening up to this point gave us diversity, but our food was still largely unprocessed and wholesome. So, and in this stage, white rice, Asian market, Asian varieties started being imported. Wheat arrived, which means bread and flour. Irish potatoes, it was successful in the Jos Plateau. So we had also planting of potatoes, and then the arrival of refined sugars. So diets became less seasonal, more imported. I remember my grandparents didn't like sugars at all. They said in Igbo, they said onatoriri. They didn't like it. They didn't like the sweetness, and it just didn't make them feel good. The 1960 to 1980s, post-independence and the oil boom. Imported rice started dominating. Tinned food started spreading. Vegetable oils replaced our palm oil. This is where they demonized palm oil and said it was high in saturated fat and told us to have the other plant vegetables that were heart healthy. And this was where biscuits and sweetened drinks increased. And the decline of traditional snacks, like we used to have dried roasted okwa with palm kernel nuts and peanuts and roasted things, but it was all falling off for cookies and sweet things. By the 1990s to the 2000s, this was the globalization era. Instant noodles arrived, frozen poultry. Back in the days, let me tell you, your whole family will kill one chicken on a Sunday. You will eat it for lunch. Family with 5 children, 6 children, you eat it for lunch, and the stew with the chicken will remain, and you will still eat it for dinner. But now people can go and eat half a chicken, 3-piece meal in a fast food joint. Back then, the man of the house, it was a patriarchal system. So the man of the house gets the gizzard. So a lot of children, like if you're 40, if you're 50 now, you probably didn't eat gizzard till you were like 20, because that was when frozen packs of gizzards were now in the shops that you can go buy gizzard, cook gizzard. Before, no, you had to kill a chicken to find a gizzard. And the oldest man in the house would eat it. So my mom told us this story once. There was a visitor, and I think he was younger than my dad. And my mom had cooked stew. So my mom served him, and he got gizzard. And he was exclaiming, he was trying to be fake polite, no, doctor should, my dad is a doctor should eat the gizzard, not me. My mom said, no, don't worry, he has his own. And then he was exclaiming, how many chickens did you cook? Blah, blah, blah. And that was, that era of, oh yeah, you can now go buy chicken wings. You can go buy this gizzard. Back in the days, no matter how much you like chicken wings, there were only 2 on each chicken. That's it. But now you can eat 12, you can eat 6, you can eat whatever. So our meat intake also increased. And then ultra refined foods just started popping up everywhere. Cheese balls, everything was now in the market. Nutrition confusion began at that era, at that phase. Then 2010 till today is what we're calling the rediscovery phase. Renewed interest in indigenous grains, millet and sorghum, fonio again, traditional vegetables. We're looking at our traditional herbs again. We're looking at fermented foods. We're looking at heritage diet. So at that point, we have realized that we need to return to how our ancestors ate. It's no more about trying to be posh or anything. We're owning our story, our history, and our food heritage, because it's what will help us just stay healthy and well. So I will just give us a history, then I'll talk about me, like my own food memory. And it might be a lot for people who were born around the same time with me in Nigeria and Eastern Nigeria. So I was born in 1986. So from that 1986 to 1997, breakfast was pretty standard in my house. It was bread and tea on the weekday. We called it tea, but it was this chocolate beverage, sometimes Bonvita, Milo, Pronto with some milk and bread with butter. And maybe Sundays, maybe you'll get sardine or egg. Sometimes cereal, cornflakes, golden morn oats. In the weekends, akara and pap, or fried yam and eggplant or something, and egg sauce, something like that. Lunch was pretty standard. It was the same every day. Every weekday, it was gari and soup. The soups were cooked in the weekend and put in the freezer. Electricity was still good. So this was very convenient. You come back from school, you warm your soup, you make your gari, you eat, whether you liked it or not. So gari, different types of soup every week. So egusi, ogbono, oha, whatever. But that was it, except on Sundays. Sundays, lunch was always rice and stew, standard. Sometimes we had plantain, we saute some vegetables on the side, but it was pretty standard. Except the exception was Ash Wednesdays and Good Fridays, because the Catholic Church, we were Catholic, and the Catholic Church abstains from meat, and the soups always have meat. So my mom, I don't remember where she learned this dish. I think it was when she was doing her master's in the UK. It's a dish that I think originated from Brazil. It's called feijão. It's beans cooked in coconut milk. It's a bit sweetened, and then she would put gari on top. So when you're served, they'll sprinkle gari on top of it. We loved it because it was a break from eating gari and soup. So Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, we had feijão. Every other weekday, gari and soup. Then we thought it was boring, but what replaced it is much worse. Dinner was the most diverse of our meals in the house, because there was a lot you could do with dinner. Yam, many ways. Yam with akidi, yam with vegetable, yam with beans. Is it beans? You can have beans with plantain, beans with corn, beans with potato. It was beans and rice. It was a long list of what you could do with beans. Rice for weekday was mainly jollof rice. or coconut rice. Fried rice at this stage in our history was still special occasions like Christmas, Easter, special visitors. So it wasn't something that we cooked weekly by any stretch. Moi moi, or moi, oka, fio, achicha. And then fio, when kerosene got expensive and refilling your gas got expensive, it started dropping from a lot of families' diets because then it got too expensive to cook it, right? And I think part of the Nigerian problem is food processing. When we process food for foreign markets, we do our best. But when we process food for our local markets, the beans is full of stones, the corn is full of stones, the millet is full of stones. It's just not fair. I don't understand why, but it's the reality. And so people just also get fatigued from cooking. What? Thank you. So people get fatigued from processing our foods. We rarely had pasta or rarely we had pasta and minced meat. And mainly it was when my mom was pregnant and she went to have the baby and my dad was cooking. He would just boil pasta and make minced meat sauce. We had no fries. No, in this stage, we didn't make French fries in my house. We only fried like sweet potato or yam. But French fries, the one you bring the pack frozen and fry, we never had that. We didn't have a deep fryer. We didn't have a microwave. If my dad wasn't home at any meal time, his food would be put in food flasks. We had this blue eleganza food flasks. It was blue and white. You put the starch on that, then the small bowl, you put like the soup or the sauce or whatever, and you cover it and put it on the dining table. When he eats, now, that was it. No microwave. We had fridge, we had freezer. My parents used to share cow with some friends. So the day they share the cow, we will cook pepper soup that day. Then we'll wash all the meat and pack it in the freezer. Pepper soup, apart from the day they buy cow, is special occasions only. Not this thing that people do that every day they're eating pepper soup. No. So they also went to this village market called Ahezilo in the outskirts of Enugu. And they'll come back with things in bulk, including egusi that we had to now peel our own egusi. We had pumpkin, we had akidi, we had a lot of yam. They used to go there and buy in bulk. They used to also they shared pigs sometimes, they shared goats sometimes. But it was a really interesting time that with a lot of meal planning, and the food was pretty standard, but it was very nutritious and we didn't know this. So we were complaining. In 1997, I went to boarding school. But before I went to boarding school, primary 5, there was a girl in my class. The father worked in the company that made 2-minute noodle. So they came to our school and cooked this 2-minute noodle, like for our whole set, primary 5. And we ate it. It's addictive, it's delicious, right? The idea is that targeting children. So you go home and tell your parents to buy it. I came home. I told my parents from that day to the next day. They didn't answer me. The same way I saw children with Capri Sun in school and told them, they didn't answer me. Back then, I thought they were being harsh, but in a way, it was protective because all these packaged juices was just not the right way, but it was something that we learned earlier, right? So then I got to boarding school. I met Indomie. It was all the rage. It was in the canteen. You can buy it. Some people could soak it. The people in the higher classes that had a cam gas, like the food and nutrition students, will cook it. Those who didn't have a gas will use a ring boiler, put it in a bowl. When it's boiling, they drop the Indomie. I can tell you categorically that ring boiler cooked Indomie tastes different. Like, I have not gone to look for a ring boiler to do it lately. Don't think I'm crazy, but it just tasted different. So my first year in boarding school, I was hungry all the time. The food was terrible. And we also didn't eat a lot of meat. So there's a pot. There are 12 people on a table. It's tiny, tiny pieces of meat. They'll count it like 12. You will share. Or when it's fish, it will be like one section of the fish. Then the person sharing would break it into pieces for all the people that were available. And then, so the every afternoon was also gari and soup, except Sundays there was rice, I think. I could not, Hamatan, they will make the gari like before lunchtime. When you arrive, it's dry and hard. So I stopped eating it. That was at the point I stopped swallowing anything. I didn't like the food in the canteen very much, and I did not know what to expect when I came to boarding school. So my provisions were not um, arranged in a way that so I was hungry all the time. Then I went for midterm break and came back more prepared. Like I came with gari and sugar and peanuts. I brought abacha and spices and palm oil. Like in class, I can soak abacha, make abacha. I brought crayfish so that anytime I don't eat something in the canteen, I could find something to eat or drink gari with milk and sugar. So my food, and then sometimes, at home, your parents regulate how much milk or sugar or whatever you're taking, but you're on your own. You have your own tin of milk, your own pack of sugar, your own pack of Bonvita, your own cornflakes. You're just eating, the sugar was unchecked and unregulated. And a lot of people also have this problem when they move alone and live alone, because our ancestors lived together. It was always communal eating. So if you come out and you want to eat egg, you will check if everybody has eaten or if the egg will go round. So that way, that communal eating kind of kept people from eating the way that you would eat when you're alone. Even when you marry, your wife will come into the compound. They'll expand your space in the household, but you guys all part of the same community. So the food did not affect me too much because there was a lot of activity. You're always running from something. In boarding school, we did a lot of sports. We're always on the move. So because if you eat too many calories or you eat too many refined things and you're also sedentary, then it's worse. But with all that movement in boarding school, it didn't really start to show the effects of the poor diet till much later. So yeah, 99, my family moved to Bonny. By then, Enugu, electricity was so unstable that a lot of families could not afford that old method of cooking soup in the weekend, putting it in the freezer, warming it every day. So more and more people were starting to find other ways to survive, which included a carton of Indomie in the house. When children come back from school, they'll just cook it. So Indomie replaced something as nutritious as gari, fermented cassava flakes, with soup, which had vegetables and stockfish and dry fish and meat in the whatever. So the electricity problem, I think, contributed to part of the thing, and also eating too many imported things. So each time the naira takes a dive, food gets more expensive. So all this foreign rice, all the pasta, all the sugar, the sardines, the geisha, a lot of the canned things that we were importing were getting more expensive. When I was younger and living in Enugu, there were a lot of local bakeries and corner shops. So what the corner shops would do is buy the bread in bulk and then sell it at a little markup. But if you had freezer space, like we did sometimes, we'd go to the bakery directly and buy like 12 loaves and put in our own freezer. At some point, they said the bakeries had bromide. A lot of them could not withstand the change to bake bromide-free bread. So a lot of them closed up, and that was replaced by the supermarket breads, the highly industrialized breads that don't mold, breads that can stay for weeks without spoiling. So we replaced one poison for another, if you ask me, because it cannot be good. It cannot be a good thing. So more and more people started picking convenient foods and all of that. Then in 2004, I went to the university. So I had roommates, and I still had a mind, because I come from a house that we always cook. We've always cooked. So I carried that along to the university, that I'll cook all my meals. Oh my God. I went with my cam gas. I went with a fridge. It was so stressful. There were so many leeches. Once I cook, people just show up to eat. They were not contributing. I was filling my cam gas. I was buying ingredients. At some point, I just quit. I'll just go to the canteen and eat as well, or buy food and bring back. So that was just how it went. I was still very active. I ate a lot of junk. I didn't cook as much. I bought food. My acne got worse. I played a lot of badminton. So I stayed active. So that helped my muscles stay insulin sensitive. 2009 to 2011, I lived at home. This was after youth service. I lived at home. I worked from home. So we cooked. It was good. A little junk here and there, but we cooked all our meals at home. In 2011, I moved to Canada. At this stage, it was the first time that I was living alone in a house. I went to Loblaws. I bought egg. There's this sausage, smoked sausage that has cheese inside. I bought it. In the morning, I'll fry 2 eggs. And I had this liter of orange juice. I'll pour myself orange juice. I'll pour myself a glass of milk. I'll take 2 slices of brown bread. I'll cook 2 eggs and then cook 2 of those sausages. When my face just went, you don't eat this much meat, I had to dial back. And this is the reality for a lot of people who move alone. You start maybe eating out, eating junk, not being very mindful. So I'm just taking in memory lane so that you start to think, when last did I have good health? When last did I not have acne? When last did I have regular bowel movement? When last was I not tired all the time? So that you start thinking of when your diet changed and how you can recalibrate. That's the essence of this conversation. But I like gisting you, but it's not just gist. It's about us thinking about food in brand new light, that there was nothing wrong with our diet. They told us it's very starchy. They told us palm oil is not good for our heart. They told us even to remove egg from our diet, cholesterol, blah, blah, blah. They've told us a lot of things. But I've gone around the world and seen even starchier diets, So it's not the starch is not the problem. If your food is unprocessed and you have natural movements throughout the day, and because my grandmother never wore canvas, I went jogging for weight loss, right? She never did. But they moved. They were busy the whole day. So we have to find a way that is either you eat less or you burn the calorie. There's no shortcut in between. So in 2014, I moved to Dubai, joined Henry. It was good. We cooked our meals. We ate out a few times. No problem. My health was getting better. In the Netherlands, my husband is Dutch, so I became Dutch. In the Netherlands, they eat bread for breakfast. For lunch, bread again. And then for dinner, warm. So it will be like meat, potatoes, vegetables. And they eat early. So sometimes you see that there's a logic to it. Bread, something very nutritious and early, because bread, you'll get hungry. So they eat early. Before 5, they've eaten. And the Germans had it the other way around. They'll eat bread in the morning. They'll eat one meal in the afternoon, then bread and cold cuts in the evening. So I've just been looking at what's the logic, but how different tribes do food. In Canada is in the new world. A lot of the people that ended up in Canada migrated from Europe and some parts of the world. So some of them took their food cultures for where they were going. But what I observed, breakfast, cereal, bread, lunch was salad, soup, sandwiches, and then a warm meal for dinner. It depends on the family and their ethnicity, because Canada was that place that you're always asking people where they're originally from. But I remember a story that my landlord told me. He grew up in Prince Edward Island. And they had a lot of lobsters in that place. But back then, at the time when he was growing up, lobster was still looked down on. It was poor people's food. They fed it to prisoners, and it was always in his lunchbox, and his classmates always laughed at him. But look at how that food history has changed. Lobster is now that food that you cannot order on the menu anyhow. So food culture changes, our habits change, but we need to stay mindful of what's important, what is nutritious, what nurtures our body, not following trends. Following trend. Health influencers today, they'll tell you bone broth, you jump for bone broth. Tomorrow they'll tell you this, you jump for this. So because every time someone will always ping me and ask, you want me to tell you what is healthy for you to eat? You want me to tell you quinoa? You want me to tell you avocado? But that's not how it works. It's not about individual foods. It's about diversity. It's about nutrients. It's about consistency, eating well, right? Thank you for sharing. So when I moved to Egypt in 2018, I got a shocker because Egypt was still the way we were in Nigeria back in the days. Like, if it's not the season, it's not the season. When I was growing up, when Odara season is over, mango season will come, orange season, something always comes in season, right? I got to Egypt. We arrived in the summer. I entered the supermarket to shop because I'd been spoilt by Dubai, living in Dubai all year round. I had broccoli, I had cauliflower, I had everything, any vegetable I wanted. I now entered the supermarket in Egypt. No broccoli, no cauliflower. They had bell pepper, okra, aubergines, that's eggplants. I was like, what's going on? They say it's not the season in the summer. These are the pepper, the spices that it will come in the winter. They don't encourage importing the things that they grow in Egypt, except the only things they used to import, maybe garlic, banana. Is a big agricultural hub in itself, and they regulate the foods that get imported. There are some smaller, more gourmet supermarkets that will charge more and import some of these things, but it wasn't really encouraged. And it taught me a lot because I started cooking taro. I started cooking some of the things that I found. And these, they are short zucchini. I started cooking the things that I found because I could not find anything else. And that's how it used to be for us. But now people have frozen their bolomo, they'll eat the whole year. That's the odara that they'll eat the whole year. So orange, watermelon, pineapple, banana, every other thing, they're not interested. If it's not available, you drink it as juice. You eat it dry. You do this. So I hope that we start thinking about, so basically, I'm just here to tell you that we have run around, and where we were, where my Nigerian ancestors were, where a lot of people were, the Peruvians, the Mexicans, the Indians, where you were earlier on, what your ancestors ate, there was a lot of wisdom to it. Like, now we eat a lot of meat. Back then, if they cook beans and corn, it's complementary protein because there's some amino acids that are more in legumes and some in grains. When they complement that protein for you and add the proteins from the crayfish that they've put inside it, nobody's going to fry fish and give you. Am I lying? Or, so some of those dishes that had like rice and beans, beans and corn, some of those dishes, they rarely served a different source of protein with it because they expected that your protein needs are met in itself. But now, this is the quantity of rice that you eat. You eat 1 cup of boiled rice, for example, with meats, maybe some vegetables, but you've gone to a buffet. You've taken your 1 cup of rice and meat. You've added fish, you've added chicken. You will still add gizdodo. You will add plantain. You will add moi moi, and you will add coleslaw. Only you. Hello, Latina. So we have to know that if there's an overabundance of things, we still have to think what is nutritious, what is necessary, and what was it before. I don't think there's any time in our history, especially as Nigerians, that we ate as much meat as we're eating now. And the more meat that you put on your plate, more things fall out. You eat less legumes, you eat less beans, you eat less vegetables. It takes up space. And all that saturated fat that they removed from your diet when they remove palm oil, you're eating it back in the meats that you're eating, especially those of you that like the fattier parts, all the tozo and co. So I hope that I have challenged us to think, challenged us to start thinking about eating locally. Food does not need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be trendy. It just needs to be nutritious. And if you have moved, because moving also affects you, like when I moved to Canada, I didn't like the price of yam in the African shop. So if you have moved and the things that are indigenous to you, the things that you used to eat have become expensive, it is wise to check what's available where you are that is cheap and find out how the locals there eat it and try to integrate it into your diet for variety. Then you can now be buying that your local food, which has become expensive, as a treat. Otherwise, you will burn out. And don't try to force everything to behave like your local food, right? Like, I remember the first time I cooked quinoa. I just treated it like rice. I boiled it to death and then I ate it with stew. It was disgusting. So I had to go back and find out who eats quinoa, how do they eat it? And that was perfect. So each time I pick a new legume, a new grain, I ask who eats it, how do they eat it? Because sometimes while you're having a lot of gas and flatulence and all of that, is that you're not eating it with the right supportive spices that the people who normally eat it do. Or you're not soaking it the way they do. You're not cooking it right or enough. So all these are pointers so that you stop struggling and have more variety of things that you can choose from. I hope this evening has been impactful for you, and I hope to see you next week. I have been asked to bring Henry on live. So next week, Thursday, Henry will be live. So if you have questions for Henry, please send them to me. Thank you so much and have a good evening. Bye.